Мы Россия доказали, что мы номер один в мире. Все рекорды мы побьем.
You come out in that fifth round with a flying knee or something crazy and you try to finish the fight. I think that this is one of those fights that Ian will go back and watch and say, fuck, wish I could do that over again.
Yeah, I mean, look, he did what he had to do and was really tested in ways that we haven't seen him tested before. I mean, it was a difficult fight. Although he won by, you know, a good margin, a healthy margin, there was moments where you're used to Islam having a certain amount of control and dominance that he just didn't seem to have.
And it's fine. Just boring fuck, dude. He landed a head kick in round 2, and other than that, he did nothing! For 20 minutes! He did fucking nothing! That's the truth! Zero! He caught him with a head kick in round 2, and other than that, he did fucking nothing! The whole fight!
Pound for pound fighter in the world, Islam Makhachev, who makes history. 17 wins in a row for Islam Makhachev. He retains his welterweight title, breaking Anderson Silva's record, which was 16 wins in a row. He did not break any title defense records or anything like that. Dana White was kind of confused about those records throughout the week. But interestingly enough, same building that Anderson Silva beat Forrest Griffin way back when, UFC 101. Now that was just a 205-pound fight, but it was one of his greatest performances ever. Same building, same city, of course. Here's Islam Makhachev against Ian Machado Garry in a fight that I think a lot of people were dismissive of Ian Machado Garry's chances in the fight, and it was looking very early on like it was going to be another Islam Makhachev masterclass, certainly after the first 2 rounds. But a funny thing happened in the 3rd and 4th. Machado Garry got his confidence, figured out how to stand and trade with him, was defending takedowns. Islam was pretty much at about 50% throughout, and even when he did take him down, wasn't inflicting much damage. 4th round, going to be very interesting to see how that would score. Now, ultimately, 2 judges gave it 49-46, one 48-47. I suspect those judges who gave it 49-46 for Ian had that 4th round for Islam. I vehemently disagree with that, and I can't see anything here. Let me just, I see it up on the screen, but my eyesight is horrible.
Like, I think that Ian is a talented guy. If he had even an ounce of killer instinct in that 5th round, you know, he had been beating him to the body. Islam's whole, I think, right side was beat up. His face was beat up. You don't come out and hug and shake hands in the fight. That shit drives me fucking crazy when there's so much at stake, and there's also, you know, a lot of mental, you know, gamesmanship, whatever you want to call it in this game. You come out in that 5th round with a flying knee or something crazy and you try to finish the fight. I think that this is one of those fights that Ian will go back and watch and say, fuck.
Islam Makhachev just did what many people expected him to do, but the way he did it has given the MMA world plenty to talk about. At UFC 330 in Philadelphia, Makhachev defeated Ian Machado Garry by unanimous decision, winning the fight 49-46 on 2 scorecards and 48-47 on the 3rd. And while the final result was clear, the fight itself revealed something much more interesting. Garry had moments, but whenever the fight reached the areas where Makhachev is most comfortable, the champion was still able to take control. This was not simply simply another title defense. Makhachev entered the fight with the chance to make history, while Garry entered with the biggest opportunity of his career. The champion was chasing his 17th consecutive UFC victory, which would move him beyond Anderson Silva for the promotion's longest winning streak, while Garry was trying to become a UFC champion and prove that his size, distance management, and evolving grappling could finally solve one of the hardest problems in mixed martial arts. And that is why the reaction from serious MMA analysts is so important. The general sentiment among professionals who studied this matchup closely was never that Garry had no chance. His height, reach, movement, striking, and ability to fight at long range created legitimate questions for Makhachev. But the bigger question was always whether Garry could force the champion to fight his fight for 5 full rounds. In the end, that question became the story of UFC 330. From the opening seconds, Makhachev made his intentions obvious. He did not spend the first round trying to prove that he could outstrike a much taller opponent. Instead, he used leg kicks, pressure, and then went directly to the legs. Once he got Garry down and connected himself to the challenger, the difference in their grappling control became clear. Makhachev stayed attached, pressured Garry against the fence, and made him work simply to create enough space to stand. That first round was important because it established the central tactical problem for Garry. Distance was his friend. Space allowed him to use his long, straight punches, kicks, movement, and timing, but Makhachev did not need to give him that space. He could close distance, change levels, connect to the legs, and turn the fight into a physical battle along the cage. Garry understood that in the second round. He started throwing more kicks from range, looking to discourage Makhachev from entering so easily. That was a smart adjustment, but then came one of the biggest moments of the fight. Makhachev landed a massive head kick that dropped Garry. Garry recovered quickly and got back to his feet, but the moment changed the complexion of the round. Makhachev immediately followed the damage with pressure, took Garry down again, and forced him to spend valuable energy defending and trying to stand. Instead of allowing Garry to recover at distance, the champion made the challenger work. That sequence showed why Makhachev is so difficult to deal with. It is not just one weapon, it is the connection between the weapons. The takedown threat makes the opponent think about wrestling. That can create openings for striking. The striking makes the opponent hesitate. That hesitation can create another takedown. And once Makhachev gets the position he wants, he can turn minutes into seconds on the clock while forcing his opponent to carry his weight and defend. But this is where the story becomes more complicated, because Garry did not simply disappear. The third round was one of the most important rounds for the challenger. Garry began finding more success with his kicks and was able to keep Makhachev at a more comfortable distance. When Makhachev secured another takedown attempt, Garry managed to reverse the position, get back up, and land meaningful strikes. He also landed a head kick and continued working with the oblique kick. MMA Fighting scored the round for Garry, giving Makhachev a 29-28 lead after 3 rounds. That adjustment mattered because it demonstrated that Garry's game was not simply built around surviving Makhachev. He was trying to make the champion pay for every entry. And that continued into the 4th round. Garry attacked the body and legs, used the oblique kick, and appeared more comfortable dealing with the champion's wrestling attempts. Makhachev still found takedowns, but Garry repeatedly worked his way back toward his feet. His size became an important factor during those exchanges, allowing him to create angles and make Makhachev work harder to keep him down. The 4th round was extremely close, and MMA Fighting scored it for Garry, making the unofficial score 38-38 heading into the final round. That is the part of this fight that should not be ignored. If someone simply looks at the headline and says, Makhachev dominated Garry, they are missing some of the tactical details. Makhachev controlled the fight's most important positions, but Garry showed enough resistance and enough adjustment to make the championship fight competitive in stretches. That is precisely why the final round became so important. 5 rounds, 1 championship, and both men had reasons to believe the fight was still within reach. Garry tried to pressure forward and land counters. He connected with straight punches, but Makhachev went back to the strategy that had worked throughout the fight. He attacked the takedown, initiated another scramble, and eventually secured a clean takedown before taking Garry's back. This time, Garry could not simply stand immediately. Makhachev stayed attached, controlled the position, landed short strikes, and threatened the submission while the clock continued to disappear. There was no wild finish, no desperate exchange, and no unnecessary risk. It was championship fighting. Makhachev recognized that he had the position that mattered and refused to give it away, and that may be the biggest lesson from UFC 330. Makhachev did not need to win every minute of every round. He needed to control the moments that could determine the fight. When Garry had distance, the challenger could compete. When Garry was able to establish his kicks and movement, he could make Makhachev hesitate. But whenever Makhachev successfully entered, connected to the body, and turned the fight into grappling, the champion repeatedly found answers. That is why several respected voices in combat sports will likely focus less on the the final scorecards and more on the tactical battle. Garry showed that his defensive wrestling and overall grappling have improved. Makhachev himself acknowledged after the fight that Garry's work with Demian Maia had clearly helped his grappling, but the champion still demonstrated that moving up to welterweight has not taken away the foundation that made him so difficult to defeat. For Garry, this loss is painful, but it is not the end of his story. He entered UFC 330 as a fighter trying to prove that he could operate at the highest level against one of the most accomplished champions in the sport. He did not get the title, but he gained 5 rounds of experience against a fighter whose entire game is designed to expose weaknesses. He also showed that he could survive difficult positions, make adjustments, and have stretches where his striking and distance control caused problems. The question now is what he does with that experience. Does Garry return to the division and rebuild toward another title opportunity? Does he focus even more heavily on wrestling and defensive grappling? Or does this fight convince him that he needs to make a deeper technical change before challenging another elite wrestler? For Makhachev, the consequences are even bigger. This victory strengthens his claim as one of the most complete fighters competing today. More importantly, he has now accomplished what he set out to accomplish at UFC 330. Another championship victory, another elite opponent defeated, and a 17-fight UFC winning streak. And there is another layer to the result. Makhachev has now shown that his style can remain effective even against a much larger welterweight opponent with a significant physical advantage. Before the fight, Garry's height and reach were among the biggest reasons analysts believed he could create problems, but physical dimensions only matter if the fighter can consistently use them. Makhachev spent much of the fight making that difficult. He forced Garry toward the fence. He attacked the legs. He mixed striking with wrestling. He made Garry defend takedowns and then attacked again. And when the fight reached the championship rounds, he was still capable of executing the same fundamental strategy under pressure. That is what makes this result significant. It was not a perfect 5-round destruction. Garry won rounds on some scorecards and had legitimate moments, but Makhachev consistently found the path back to the style that gives him the greatest chance of winning. That adaptability is one of the reasons analysts continue to treat him as such a difficult championship puzzle. And now the division has another problem. Who can actually stop him? Garry could not do it. The striking approach alone was not enough. The size advantage was not enough. Improved grappling was not enough. Makhachev still found the takedowns and control when he needed them most. So the next challenger will have to bring something different. They will need to maintain distance without becoming predictable. They will need to defend takedowns without exhausting themselves. They will need to punish Makhachev during entries without giving him opportunities to chain attacks together. And perhaps most importantly, they will have to remain dangerous deep into the championship rounds. Because UFC 330 just reminded everyone of something very important. Beating Islam Makhachev is not about surviving his first attack. It is about solving the entire sequence. Garry survived. He adapted. He made the fight competitive. But when the most important moments arrived, Makhachev was the fighter who controlled the positions, controlled the pace, and ultimately controlled the result. So now the debate begins. Was this simply another Makhachev masterclass, or did Ian Machado Garry reveal enough improvements to suggest that a rematch could look completely different? And after watching Garry survive 5 rounds while winning stretches of the fight, do you believe he is still the man most capable of eventually solving Makhachev at welterweight? Let me know your verdict. Was Islam's performance a true domination, or did Garry make this much closer than the word dominated suggests? Subscribe for more UFC news, fight reactions, expert analysis, and post-fight breakdowns as the biggest stories in combat sports continue to unfold.